Jaya Rama Madhava Kunjabi Jaya Rama Jai Gopi Mohan ki jai, Mahaprabhu ki jai, Samved Bhagavad ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Nayanam Namaskritya. Narottamam. Devim Saraswatim Vyasam. Tato Jayam Udiraye. Chapter 4 on the process creation from text 9 and 10. We could just chant text 9 and then I'll read the translation and then go on and chant text 10 and do more of the call and response and individually chanted and then I'll read the purport. We're starting with text 9. Yatha gunam stu prakriter Yugapat kramasho piva Karti Purishastveka Urvan Karmani Janmabhi. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is one, whether he alone acts with the modes of material nature, or simultaneously expands in many forms, or expands consecutively to direct the modes of nature. Text 10. Chikitsitam itanme
Vichikitsitam etan me.
Vichikitsitam etan me.
Vichikitsitam etan me.
Ravitu Bhagavan Yata.
Ravitu Bhagavan Yata.
Shabde Brahmani Nishnat.
Shabde Brahmani Nishnata.
Shabde Brahmani Nishnata.
Shabde Brahmani Nishnata.
Prasme Chabavan Kalu.
Prasmashishtavan kalu.
Vichikitsitam etan me.
Vichikitsitam etan me.
Ravitu Bhagavan Yata.
Ravitu Bhagavan Yata.
Shabde Brahmani Nishnata.
Shabde Brahmani Nishnata.
Parasmin Bhavan Kalu.
Prasmashishtavan kalu.
Please chant.
Vichikitsitam etan me. Vichikitsitam etan me.
Bhagavan Yata.
Ravitu Bhagavan Yata.
Shabde Brahmani Nishnata.
Shabde Brahmani Nishnata.
Parasmin Bhavan Kalu.
Prasmashishtavan kalu.
Shikshitam etan me.
Vichikitsitam etan me.
Ravitu Bhagavan Yata.
Ravitu Bhagavan Yata.
Shabde Brahmani Nishnata.
Shabde Brahmani Nishnata.
Parasmin Bhavan Kalu.
Prasmashishtavan kalu.
Vichikshitam etan me.
Vichikitsitam etan me.
Ravitu Bhagavan Yata.
Ravitu Bhagavan Yata.
Shabde Brahmani Nishnata.
Shabde Brahmani Nishnata.
Parasmin Bhavan Kalu.
Prasmashishtavan kalu.
Vichikitsitam.
Vichikitsitam.
Doubtful inquiry.
Doubtful inquiry.
Etat. This.
This.
Me.
Me.
Of me.
Of me.
Ravitu.
Ravitu.
Just clear up.
Just clear up.
Bhagavan.
Bhagavan.
Powerful like the Lord.
Powerful like the Lord.
Yata.
Yata.
As much as. Shabde.
Shabde.
Sound translated.
Sound translated.
Brahmani.
Brahmani.
Vedic literature.
Vedic literature.
Nishnata.
Nishnata.
Fully realized.
Realized.
Parasmin.
Parasmin.
In transcendence.
Transcendence.
Cha.
Cha.
Also.
Also.
Lavan.
Lavan.
Your good self.
Yourself.
Kalu.
Kalu.
As a matter of fact.
As a matter of fact.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Kindly clear up all these doubtful inquiries, because you are not only vastly learned in the Vedic literatures and self-realized in transcendence, but are also a great devotee of the Lord, and are therefore as good as the personality of Godhead. Purport. In the Brahma Samhita, it is said that the supreme absolute truth of Govinda, the personality of Godhead, although one without a second, was infallibly expanded by innumerable forms non-different from one another. And although he is the original person, he is still ever young with permanent youthful energy. He is very difficult to know simply by learning the transcendental science of the Vedas, but he is very easily realized by his pure devotees. The expansion of different forms of the Lord, as from Krishna to Baladev, Sankarsana, from Sankarsana to Vasudev, from Vasudeva to Aniruddha, from Aniruddha to Pradyumna, and then again to the second Sankarsana, and from him to the Narayan Purusha avatars, and innumerable other forms, which are, compared to the constant flowing of the uncontrollable waves of a river, are all one and the same. They are like lamps of equal power, which kindle from one lamp to another. That is the transcendental potency of the Lord. The Vedas say that he is so complete that even though the whole complete identity emanates from him, he still remains the same complete whole. Purnasya Purnapadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. As such, there is no validity in a material conception of the Lord produced by the mental speculator. Thus he remains always a mystery for the mundane scholar, even if he is vastly learned in the Vedic literature. Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhakto. Therefore, the Lord is beyond the limit of conception for mundane learned scholars, philosophers, or scientists. He is easily understandable for the pure devotee because the Lord declares in the Bhagavad Gita 1854 that after surpassing the state of knowledge, when one is able to be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, then only can one know the true nature of the Lord. One cannot have any clear conception of the Lord or his holy name, form, attributes, pastimes, etc., unless one is engaged in his transcendental loving service. Statement of the Bhagavad Gita that one must first of all surrender unto the Lord, being freed from all other engagements, means that one must become a pure, unconditioned devotee of the Lord. Only then can one know him by the strength of devotional service. Maharaj Parikshit admitted in the previous verse that the Lord is inconceivable even for the greatest learned scholars. Why then should he again request Shukadeva Goswami to clarify his insufficient knowledge about the Lord? The reason is clear. Not only was Shukadeva Goswami vastly learned in the Vedic literatures, but he was also a great self-realized soul and a powerful devotee of the Lord. A powerful devotee of the Lord is, by the grace of the Lord, more than the Lord himself. The personality of Godhead, Sri Ramachandra, attempted to bridge the Indian Ocean to reach the island of Lanka, but Sri Hanumanji, the unalloyed devotee of the personality of Godhead, could cross the ocean simply by jumping over it. The Lord is so merciful upon his pure devotee that he presents his beloved devotee as more powerful than himself. The Lord expressed himself to be unable to save Durvasa Muni, although the Muni was so powerful that he could reach the Lord directly under material conditions. But Durvasa Muni was saved by Maharaj Ambarish, a devotee of the Lord. Therefore, not only is a devotee of the Lord more powerful than the Lord, but also worship of the devotee is considered more effective than direct worship of the Lord. Mad Bhakta Puja Vyadika. The conclusion is, therefore, that a serious devotee must first approach a spiritual master who is not only well versed in the Vedic literatures, but is also a great devotee with factual realization of the Lord and his different energies. Without the help of such a devotee, spiritual master, one cannot make progress in the transcendental science of the Lord. And a bona fide spiritual master like Shukadeva Goswami does not speak about the Lord only in the matter of his internal potencies, but also explains how he associates with his external potencies. The Lord's pastimes in the internal potency are displayed in his activities in Vrindavan, but his external potential works are directed in his speeches of Karanaranavashaya Vishnu, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and Kshirodakashaya Vishnu. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur offers his good counsel to the interested Vaishnavas when he says that they should not be interested in hearing only about the Lord's activities like Rasa Lila, but must be keenly interested in his pastimes and his features of the Purusha avatars in connection with Shrishti Tattva, creational functions, following the examples of Maharaj Parikshit, the ideal disciple, and Shukadeva Goswami, the ideal spiritual master. Om Jnana-Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunditam Nina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Gurutare Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravana Prachayani Nirshesha Shunyavadi Tashrita Jishatavane Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Gaura Bhaktivedanta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you all very much for this opportunity to give the Bhagavatam class. I was not expecting this necessarily when I moved here because there's so many stalwart devotees who have been serving for decades and for years who are definitely more than qualified. But it's just your mercy upon me to give me an opportunity to practice and to purify myself with the service. So I'm begging for your mercy that I can say something pleasing for you all to hear. The topic is infinite in general, so there's never enough that can be said about Krishna, his devotees, and his pastimes. And I'm just gonna more or less give a little bit of a footnotes to Prabhupada's purport because he's also giving so much for us to discuss here and try to speak something. How long do we go until? Is it just 8 o'clock or quarter after? Okay, 8:15.
8:15.
Okay, thank you. That's this.
And that includes the discussion.
Okay, so then I'll go to like 8:05 something. Thank you. So Maharaj Parikshit is asking, kindly clear up all these doubtful inquiries, because you are not only vastly learned in the Vedic literatures and self-realized in transcendence, but are also a great devotee of the Lord and are therefore as good as the personality of Godhead. So this is Maharaj Parikshit speaking to Shukadeva Goswami in the 4th chapter, which is, I guess, preceding Shukadeva Goswami's description of the Sarga and Visarga, the primary and secondary creations of the Lord. And so earlier in the chapter, in text 6 and 7, Maharaj Parikshit asks basically to understand how the Lord creates, maintains, and annihilates the universe. And in text 6 he says, I beg to know from you how the personality of Godhead creates these phenomenal universes as they are, which are inconceivable even to the great demigods. And text 7, he says, kindly describe how the Supreme Lord, who is all-powerful, engages his different energies and different expansions in maintaining and again winding up the phenomenal world in the sporting spirit of a player. And so, just reading text 6, there's something interesting that I caught here in the text. He says that the phenomenal universes are inconceivable even to the great demigods. It's Durvi Bhavyam, yeah, inconceivable Adishwarai, by the great demigods. So this world that we're living in, it's a mystery. It's kind of perplexing, and everyone is experiencing that in some form or another. Generally, children reach a certain age where they start to ask a lot of why questions. And why this? And then the parents say, well, because of A. Well, then why A? Because of B. And why B? Because of C. And then eventually children might continue to question their parents on existential things, and eventually the parents will just say, because Y is a crooked letter. Which means stop asking these questions. I can't give you a real answer to it. And what perplexes everyone is something like the problem of evil, how good things happen to bad people, how bad things happen to good people in this world seems to not be very clear. Without the conception of karma and the eternality of the soul, if you have an atheistic conception that we're born into this world by chance, everything comes from matter, and we eventually die and nothing happens, then it's a pretty bewildering thing. There's a famous philosopher of the 20th century named Albert Camus, who was famous for his absurdist philosophy. He said the world is absurd, everything is crazy, what to do. And he has a famous quote where he says the meaning of life is whatever prevents you from killing yourself. That's the meaning of life. So that's a very charming philosophy, and you don't see many people who follow that being bright-faced and happy-go-lucky. It's a pretty scary kind of conception. So this world is scary, and why is it scary? Because it's dukkhalayam shashvatam, abrahma bhuvanaloka. From the tippity top all the way to the best place in the universe you could possibly be, Brahmaloka, people live there, according to Bhagavatam, the descriptions that we have, they live for much longer lives than we have. They have so much more material opulence than we have experiencing on the earthly middle planetary realm. And still, despite all of those kinds of opulences, they're not much more happy than anyone, because the position is still dukkhalayam. It's still within the realm of misery and ashashvatam, and it's temporary. So something about I always think about material happiness in this way, especially to kind of pacify myself when my mind is, being a sadhaka and a newer devotee, when my mind is, hankering for something and trying to, uh, there's still some attraction for material life. I just remember that if you endeavor for material happiness, it sounds like a great idea sometimes, but there's only three things can happen. You can get what you want, and then that's great. You might experience some happiness from achieving whatever material thing you had desired, but then you lose it eventually, either at the time of death or from some other circumstance which is out of your control, and then you suffer. Or two, you end up getting what you want, but then it actually didn't really satisfy you to the extent that you thought it would, and so then you suffer for that. Or three is that you don't even get it at all, and then you just suffer for that. That's why Prahlad Maharaj in the 9th chapter of the 7th canto, he talks about the futility of uh, going for material happiness. He says, Kutra Shisha Shruti Sukam Mrigatrishni Rupa Shruti Sukam. It sounds great. Material happiness sounds like a good idea. It's pleasing to hear. But it's actually Mrigatrishni Rupa. It's just like a mirage in the desert. You think that you're going to go for that water and it's going to quench your thirst and you're going to be so ecstatic by it, but really it's just a mirage that you're chasing. And what are you experiencing that happiness with? Quedam kalevram shesha rujam viroha. Quedam kalevram. And then he says, what is the use of this body? Which is the medium, the senses that we're matras parshas kukontea. We're experiencing material happiness through our senses in a body which is Ashesha Rujam Viroha. It is the source of unlimited diseases. And like Vijay was saying in the class a couple of days ago, he has diseases that we've never even heard of before. So there's so many different diseases that the body can get. So much, so much more opportunity for suffering that we can experience with the spiritual or with the material body. And then so then he goes on to say, Na vidite na tujino. Oh, aptiti vidvan. Yeah, the piti vidvan. That even though people understand this, they might have heard this from some good place. They heard it from a sadhu. Most wisdom traditions in the world, or spiritual traditions, Christianity, Buddhism, there's some sense of this. You're not the body. You're a spiritual being, or your consciousness, and in some sense separate from the body, and so you're not supposed to just go for material happiness. But despite that, we still, we see practically in these other traditions of the world, which we offer respects to, the rubber doesn't really seem to hit the road, even though some of their scriptures and their teachings are really lofty and high in this place. They're just plugging away into, Durga's machine, going through the motions in the material world, suffering like an atheist or someone who's not really practicing any sort of spiritual or transcendental kind of path, or approaching something like that even. So even though people might know this, they might get some sense of this from a sadhu or from some tradition, philosophy that they're practicing. They still don't actually accept these things. Nirvidite na. And then kamanalam madhulabai shamanan dwalai. They're trying to pacify their minds. And this endeavor, Prahlad Maharaj says, is ultimately like trying to extinguish a fire by dripping little drops of honey on it. And so also in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is comparing lust to a fire. It's a really nice string of verses.
This is the third chapter.
Yeah. Does anyone know which word starts with text?
Kama Asia, Krona Asia.
Oh yeah, that's 33. Oh, thank you. Yeah, Kamesha Krodesha Raja Guruna Samudvara Mahashana Mahapatma Vidyinam Yevairanam. So yeah, this is what is propelling people to act against their self-interest, which Arjuna is asking in the previous verse. what force impels one to sinful acts? And he specifically says, atakena prayukto yam papam charati purusha. Papam charati purusha. What impels a man to do sinful things? And Krishna says it's lust only. She's born in the middle of passion and is transformed into wrath or anger later, and is the all-devouring sinful enemy of the world. And then he goes on to say, as the fire is covered by smoke, as the mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. And then he goes on to say, the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and burns like fire. So yeah, like Prahlad Maharaj is saying, it's like a fire they're trying to extinguish little drops of honey. It's not a very hopeful endeavor. It's not ever going to happen. So, this verse from Gita, the last one I read, Krishna says that the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust. And Prabhupada's translating this word jnanam in the text as pure consciousness. And so then it's a good segue to speak about, what our actual nature is. If we can discern, very clearly by our experience that trying to endeavor for material happiness in this world is not a valuable use of time, and it causes more suffering and entanglement, and it really compounds on itself like anything. It's like a quicksand. The more you try to dig yourself out of it by your own endeavor and become happy, I'm really suffering now, but as soon as I get this job, then I'm gonna be really happy, and I get the girlfriend, and then I'll be happy, and then I'm gonna buy a house, and then once we get the house, I'll be happy. But really, it just entangles me more and more. It's like you're sinking deeper and deeper in quicksand the more you try to struggle for it. And that's why Narada Muni gives a really nice example to King Pachin Barhisha in the fourth canto, and Prabhupada speaks about this a lot in the purports there, about this kind of entangling nature of material desires, or the entangling nature of endeavoring for material happiness is that it's like you have a heavy burden called suffering, and it's on your head, like you're carrying a big plank or something, and it starts to get kind of, it's too heavy, you don't want to hold it there anymore, so then you just move it to your shoulder. But the same burden is still there. I mean, I guess this example, it's the same thing. You're still suffering, but you just are transforming your suffering in a slightly different way, and you think that's happiness. There's a kind of absence of a certain kind of suffering, but then in order to create that absence, you have to actually give an opportunity for a new kind of suffering that you have to experience. That's the nature of material happiness. Like all these examples I was giving, I need the girlfriend, I need the house, and we're gonna get married, and the kids, and the yard, and the pool, and the boat. All those things you have to do. You're suffering for want of money, so then you have to work hard like a dog to earn it. You're suffering for want of a partner, so then you're going to have to work in order to achieve one, to get a partner, and then you have to maintain a relationship, which is so much work. And then you want to work hard for a house. Then you get the house, actually great. I got my dream house. Now I have all this property tax that I have to maintain, and I got to cut the yard every week. Otherwise, they're going to charge me for the homeowners association. All these things are there. It's like, oh my God, this is like really, it's crazy. That's why, that's why it's recommended that we try to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the medium of a spiritual master in order to become really happy in one sense. And like Krishna is saying in that verse of the Gita, that pure consciousness is covered by material desire. Pure consciousness is probably Prabhupada translates it. So it's not an unnatural thing. It's the soul's position to be a servant of Krishna. Jiva Swarupa Hoy Krishna and Nikidas. So it's the most natural thing for us. And it's an ontological kind of truth about it. It's something that you can't change. And it's just something that people are forgetting in this world, trying to be enjoyers. And Krishna gives the symptoms of Asuric people or atheistic, demonic people in the 16th chapter. And basically, it's just people who are trying to become Krishna. They're trying to be supreme ruler, supreme controller, Lord of all they survey. And yeah, they totally devoted themselves by that. So it's our natural position to love Krishna and serve him. And so that's why, well, not why, but Shukadeva Goswami, in the second chapter of the first canto, who here's memorized the full second chapter of the first canto? Paul? You got the 30, get the 39?
Yeah, 34.
Oh, 34, yeah. Yeah, it's a good one to know. I personally don't know it, but there are a lot of nice verses in it. Like this one. Savai Puni Sam Karo Daimon Yito Bhakti Hochite Ahai Tuk Yakuti Hata Yayatma Supasidati. What's the only thing that will fully satisfy the self? In the pre world or Anandamaya Vyasa. It's understandable that material or that the spirit soul jivas in this world are looking for happiness. That's just their nature. We can't help it. We're looking for some kind of happiness. So if you're trying to get happiness, the real thing that will fully satisfy the self is unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional service to the Lord. It's our natural position, but we've forgotten it. It's a long story how that happened. Said that we're conditioned since time immemorial, nitya bandhav. And so in order to realize this nature, we have to meet a proper representative of the Lord in the form of the Guru. And so Prabhupada, in the end of the purport, is really emphasizing that. And the penultimate paragraph, he says, the conclusion is, therefore, that a serious devotee must first approach a spiritual master who not only is well versed in the Vedic literatures, but is also a great devotee with factual realization of the Lord and his different energies. Without the help of such a devotee spiritual master, one cannot make progress in the transcendental science of the Lord. And a bona fide spiritual master like Shukadeva Goswami does not speak about the Lord only in the matter of his internal potencies, but also explains how he associates with his external potencies. And this goes back to the verse itself. Maharaj Parikshit is saying, Shukadeva Goswami, you are vastly learned in Vedic literatures, self-realized in transcendence, and you're a great devotee of the Lord, and you're therefore as good as the personality of Godhead, and so you can clear up my doubtful inquiries about the creation, maintenance, or destruction of the world. So the formula for approaching a spiritual master is given by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnananas tadvadarshana. That if you want to get the transcendental knowledge imparted to you, you have to approach a spiritual master by inquiring from him submissively. Pranipatena is you approach them. Pariprashnena, you submissively inquire, and then sevaya, you render service to them. And these souls can impart knowledge unto you. Upadikshati te jnanam, they can give you the knowledge. Jnananas tattvadarshana. So it's because they have actually seen the truth. Jnananas tattvadarshana. Tattvadarshana, yeah, they've gotten darshan, they've seen the truth, they've been in contact with the truth. And there's one thing I always like to emphasize for myself. That's why I'm really grateful that I'm here in ISV, because I feel like the Sangha here is really tapping into this experiential aspect of Krishna consciousness. It's a really high philosophy. I even heard one devotee say that you can turn someone's head around in the bar if you just tell them the philosophy. The Lord got so many, expands in so many different ways, like Prabhupada speaking about in the beginning of the purport. So many different forms, from Sankarshan to Vasudev, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, back to Sankarshan, and then second expansion and all the rest. And yeah, we're like waves flowing through the river, and then spiritual worlds, couple virtue trees and everything. So it's a very lofty, and Krishna worships his devotees. He's varying his devotees as being higher than himself. Prabhupada saying in the purport here, like in the example of Ramachandra and Hanuman. and Maharaj Ambarish and Durvasuni and the Chakra of the slave Durvasuni. So with such a high philosophy, you could turn people's heads around with it, but then to actually experience it is another thing. But Krishna says in the 9th chapter, Rajavidya Rajabunyam Pakacham Edivuttamam Pratyaksha Bhagavan Dharma Susukam Kartanavya. This is the happy path. This is the joyful path where you see the most bright-faced people who are actually experiencing it. And that's why it's the highest one, well, not why I should say, but it's the highest Dharma. I'll just look it up. I don't have to use that translation. This knowledge is the king of education, Rajavidya, Rajaviryam. It's the most secret. It's the purest knowledge, Pavitram, Idam Uttamam. And it gives the direct perception of the self by realization, Pratyaksha Bhagavan Dharma. So it's everlasting and joyfully performed as well. Yeah, so you get a Tattvadarshi, you get a guru who's actually experienced this, he's actually seen the truth, seen Krishna, or at least he's heard Krishna from another bona fide guru in the Parampara. So the knowledge is purely passed down, and you get to begin to experience it yourself, and you just plug into the flow of mercy coming from the guru, and plurality of gurus, and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami begins his Chaitanya Charitamrita Vande Gurun in the plural, Shiksha Guru, Diksha Guru, and well, both of them are equal. It's understood in our tradition, and so we venerate all of the souls who are acting in that principle for us, and are allowing us to tap into the unlimited message of the personality of Godhead, overcoming our material nature, which has been causing us so much trouble from time immemorial, receiving the unlimited mercy of Krishna, more concentrated in the form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of whom we are following the line of his followers, and trying to every day, practically, in this ashram, to spread it to other people for the welfare of the entire world. Please use the acharyas. And so, yeah, it's a big subject, the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the world. And we're just starting, so I'll open it up for any reflections, questions, and especially corrections. I don't have such a good grasp on the philosophy, and there's a lot more for me to learn, so I want to make sure if I said anything that was even slightly deviating from our proper understanding, that it's brought up. So, perfect. Thank you all. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Evil.
Go to the next one.
Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for the nice class. Really enjoyed it. I like how you were sharing your personal example when everyone was distracted by material happiness. One should have a way to think, to apply the Shastra, so that one can reason with the mind and get over it. I like how you quoted the shloka from Prahlad Maharaj, that where is happiness in this material world? So thank you so much, Prabhu. That nectar, it was smooth. It was like flow waterfall as you were speaking. I have a question regarding the purport. Prabhupada mentions about different avatars, different incarnations from starting Krishna to Baladev to Sankarshan,
Yeah.
and then quadruple expansions going over to Shirodakshai, Karna, Vishnu. Yeah. So because we know the spiritual world is never annihilated. At what part of this expansion is actually created and what is eternally existing? So we say material world is manifest and unmanifest.
Right.
But spiritual world is always, it is never unmanifest. So in these expansions of Krishna, beginning from Baladev, some question you asked the what part is actually part of the spiritual world and what is unmanifested and manifested.
That's a very detailed question. I feel like maybe in the purports to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's translation of and commentary on the Brahma-samhita, there might be some insight. I can't personally answer that so much based on my own knowledge or realization. What I can say is that as far as the material creation is concerned, my understanding is that it is also it's eternal in the sense that there was never a point that Krishna decided to, do the material creation. And as far as all of these Vishnu Tattva forms are concerned, also they are eternal in one sense, in the sense that they are, uh, pure spirit. They're, the same Satchitananda Vigraha as Krishna and Brahman. Spirit, pure spirit in the form of personal form of Vishnu. But they only, and so they are coming from the spiritual world, from Krishna ultimately, and so they are eternal in that sense. But they're due to their function in the material world, they only manifest in the material world. Like for instance, the Paramatma. For someone in Goloka Vrindavan or in Vaikuntha, they don't have a Paramatma. That's only in the material world for someone with a material body. There's no need for you to have a Paramatma if you're a pure spirit soul and the Paramatma is standing right in front of you. So that's a little. But if anyone wants to share anything more, I don't have such a
I didn't fully understand your question.
My question is there is a progression which is given in the purport starting from Krishna through different expansions. So we understand that progression is given for creation of material world. At what point of that progression is part of the material creation, and what part of that progression is part of spiritual creation?
Oh, okay. I think it's right before the Purusha avatars. Everything else is in Bhagavatam.
Well, the thing is that no such thing as creation on the spiritual plane. Creation exists when the spiritual energy is in contact with the material energy pradana, and then there's ignition, so to speak, of the forms which are manifesting and unmanifesting. But in one sense also there's no creation or destruction in that sense, because actually the elements remain in their primordial state. But the development of those forms over time is how we perceive creation, maintenance, and destruction. How they grow, stay in place, and then ultimately disintegrate. So when Mahavishnu activates the pradana, and then that Mahatattva expands into the material energy. As the material energy and then the creation expands. Then there's a consideration of creation. But Brahma Samhita goes into excruciating detail, like he was saying, especially Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's. So Brahmadendra Prabhu, I think, knows a lot about this, or Vijay Prabhu.
I think it's quite clear in Chaitanya that it says that Krishna has limited expansions, and when they come into material world, they are called avatars. So it means all these forms of God, they eternally exist. So, and also this famous slogan from Chandogya Upanishad, Sata Aikshata Bhahusyam Rajarya. it says that he glanced over. So basically, it's Mahavishnu who glanced over the energy. And it's not expensive to many, expensive to living entities and thinking of the body. I mean, we call it expansion. The way we use language, Sanskrit or English, it's like expansion is a product of expand. So it means it sounds like before expanding, these were not there. But this materialistic concept, because we don't have better words. Krishna is the origin of all forms, but all his lack of better word expansion or Amsha. Amsha is also part. So it looks like they kind of chipped off the complete part. So we are talking about it in a past tense, but in eternity there's no past tense. It's difficult to understand for us. So in that sense, it's not that Krishna was alone. Or that Radha Krishna Prakriti Nikriti was worse. Radha Krishna. Yeah, so it says that Krishna divided himself. They were one, but they divided for pleasure, for pastimes. So it's again past tense. So that's why we see all verses, all teachings, all statements, scriptures in the light of definitions and conclusions. Otherwise, we get at one point, first one and there are two about that in Krishna. Radharani is eternal, Krishna is eternal, Narayana is eternal, Vishnu is eternal. But they are sourced in Krishna. That's spiritual mathematics. They are sourced in Krishna, so when did they source out of Krishna? That's a wrong question. She says it's a crooked. Basically, you cannot understand. And there's no need, but accepting that they are all eternal, existing soul. In that sense, Krishna explains that soul is eternal. It's the very time that soul didn't exist. But when it says he's one and then he becomes many, it means he's creating material worlds, living entities by his glance into the womb of material creatures, so they try to satisfy their desires and eventually come back to him.
Srimad Bhagavatam. Pancha.
Jai.